Overall, I think that the teachers' responses reflect only about a third of what Banks would define as multicultural education. They do talk about the exposure of the students to minorities and their stories. They talk about making sure that they have representation in our literature, but they do leave out the other um, facets of culture, such as social standing, gender, sexuality. And so they are certainly missing, I think, a part of it. We are an elementary school where probably some of those things are a little bit more difficult to discuss. So it could be forgiven that they don't mention some of those. I myself am the teacher of the older students, and no other fifth grade teacher did respond at this time. We might have had a slightly different response. The other thing I don't think that they really brought up was the idea of social change or social justice with multicultural education and trying to create um, a, a culture or an atmosphere of success for our students who maybe historically aren't successful. And I think really for the most part, that's because we are surrounded by that daily. We are a low income school, high English language learner population, and we know that they traditionally don't succeed. And we put in all of our effort in making sure that our students do have every opportunity that they can. So basically, everything that we do, we are trying to make sure that they succeed. And while it may not have been something that they mentioned in multicultural education, I do know that if I had mentioned specifically about success and maybe making sure that all students succeed, they would have brought that up. But I did want to make sure that I didn't tinge what they thought multicultural education was. I do think that these viewpoints might cause a little bit of issues with students who do find their identity in their gender or sexuality, or in their social standings. Um, However, I do hope that those things are, and I do know that those things are more prevalent in middle school. I do think that sometimes their own opinions are shown through in their avoidance of those topics. I know that a few teachers have opposing views on particularly sexuality and gender expression, and they don't bring it up in order to make sure that they do not contradict what is the current climate, which for on one hand, that's a good thing because we don't want them to be put in a position where um, they're felt that they are discriminating against students because of what they say. On the other hand, their silence could exacerbate problems that are already there or thoughts that are already there that could lead to discrimination, and prejudice. I think that instructional design is vital to these issues where there might be some holes that one teacher might not understand enough about, or to aid the teacher in getting the literature that was mentioned before. A good instructional designer will be able to include those types of um, content, that kind of content, so the teacher doesn't have to. Technology certainly can also give us that accessibility to other um, materials that possibly aren't readily available in print. It also would allow us to be able to see um, the cultures rather than simply read about them. And as one of the teachers mentioned, we could hear about it in their own voice through videos or video conferencing. There is something certainly powerful in hearing about someone's personal journey or personal experiences when it comes from they themselves. And it's also not as powerful when all of that multicultural information comes from a very white face, um, or a face that generally at my school doesn't look like yours. And so technology can allow a little bit more of that, whereas the printed page doesn't offer that rich depth of understanding and feeling